Welcome to the Saturday Cadence podcast. I'm Blake Biscardi, and remember, the Saturday Cadence podcast is the heartbeat of college football. USC and Tennessee are looking to assert themselves amongst the top contenders in college football in tough road environments this Saturday. And speaking of tough environments, the Swamp is turning hostile on its own head coach as Billy Napier's future is in jeopardy. Welcome into the heartbeat of college football. My name is Blake Biscardi, and I've got Grant Kincaid alongside for our 82nd episode of Saturday Cadence. And as always, this show is presented by the Silver Bulletin. Grant, let's jump right into the state of Florida. What program is in worse shape, in your opinion? The University of Florida or Florida State?
That is a very tough question at this juncture. You could maybe say that Florida State is, based on their record, but Florida got to play Samford at home, in between their two losses. So it's tough. I mean, both of these coaches, I'd say maybe Napier just because Florida State had their success last year. So Florida and Napier, I think that situation is a little more dire. Florida, is a little more desperate than Florida State is, just for any kind of success.
Yeah, I mean, program-wide, looking at these two, not just this year, I think you're right, that Florida State is in much better shape than Florida. Now, there's going to be a lot of talk that Mike Norvell's job, he should be on the hot seat, all this stuff. I'm going to just label that as nonsense for right now because they have proven success. They've used the transfer portal, right? And you had a lot of guys and analysts and proven head coaches and NFL scouts and people who know football talk highly of Florida State going into the year. And part of what makes a team is the culture and how they come together as an actual team. It's not just talent acquisition. And I think this is a perfect case study of what we're seeing is just because you can have good talent acquisition, you can recruit well, you can bring in good guys in the portal, it has to translate to being a team on the field as well, because there's been a disparity between practice and the playing field. If you just ask Mike Norvell, you can tell by his press conferences. I mean, even look at Nick Saban. He went to practice in the summer, and he picked Florida State to win the ACC. And there was a lot of analysts out there, myself included, that picked Florida State to win the ACC. But then you look at a program like Florida, we've expected them to not be good this year. We knew the schedule was difficult. We knew they'd have a lot in front of them, tough matchups, starting with Miami and A&M in 2 of the first 3 weeks is pretty difficult, not to mention what's down the pike of the schedule. But they just almost lifeless on offense. I mean, they got boat raced by Miami in week 1, and then against A&M, you're down 20 points at the half at home. That stuff cannot happen. So for Billy Napier, I think it's just a matter of when for his job. It's not an if anymore. Going into the season, you could have an if there, but I think it's just a matter of when Billy Napier gets moving for, they let him go and they bring in somebody else to fill that role. And there's going to be a lot of big names that are floated around that role because Florida does have the right infrastructure as a program to move forward. It's not going to be this total rebuild from the ground up in every area of that program. It's just going to be some talent acquisition, getting the right guys in there. Their NIL collective is good. They've got good leadership. It's just head coach and the current roster. It's just something is not working, and it's just time to move off of Napier. You see it the same way?
Yeah, and that's why I was kind of saying is you hit the nail right on the head, in that Florida's been at this point where they had to see something this year,
right?
Especially having Mertz. He had a year to really acclimate himself to the program and the offense and everything, and then you get Lagaway, a guy who's uber talented in the building. And it's a program like Florida that has expectations that are way better than they've had lately, and to lose the way they did to A&M this past week, there's something just seriously going awry. Because that's an A&M team that was, it lost to Notre Dame at home, the same Notre Dame team that just lost to Northern Illinois. And I'm not, trying to do a degree of separation, but that's not nothing, and A&M went in there and put up 33 points with absolute ease in the
With a
Swamp.
backup quarterback too.
Exactly. I mean, just so something is, you can't put your finger on it, but it has to be coaching maybe at this point, because Florida has the talent and they've amassed the talent by now. So yeah, I would have to agree.
Right. And as a program, Florida has the resources to be one of the top programs in the SEC. Now, I'm not saying they're going to overtake Georgia, Alabama, or what Tennessee's trying to build up into Texas, where they're at, but Florida can compete in the SEC with the resources and the talent that they have. They just got to get that coaching staff correct and then fill some holes on that roster. I think turning to DJ Lagway would be a good decision, just planning for the future here in the next couple of weeks if Mertz still continues to not produce. But Grant, another team too was sticking in the SEC right here. Georgia survived in Kentucky. Now they're going to be off this week, and next week, showdown in Tuscaloosa. They've got Alabama. Things have to be right. We know they're not deep on the defensive line. Listening to Kirby Smart, you could also see just the fatigue setting in for Georgia on that defensive line late in that game, and it was good for them to play Kentucky. And I think Kentucky could have won that game and probably should have won that game. You can question officiating, but what do you make of Georgia just surviving a scare like that? It's something we've seen from the Dogs before, but heading into Alabama, what do you make of what we saw in Lexington the other night?
I mean, I was really intrigued. At halftime it was what 6-9 or something like that. Just a real muck fest. Kentucky did exactly what they wanted to do. Stoops, he brought Georgia down to what he wanted to do in that game plan, and you could see them. They just stalled. It just over and over and over again. They just could not get anything going until they absolutely had to get any amount of points. Obviously by the end of the game, but it's something. I don't think Kentucky's a bad team, but that's it's a team that you shouldn't necessarily struggle that much against. They also Chip Trainum, the Ohio State transfer, he wasn't even playing in the game. So they were short a man on offense and still able to possess the ball long enough and move the ball well enough on Georgia to keep them in the game. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see what Georgia can do with this stretch coming up.
I mentioned that Georgia was fortunate to play Kentucky because if they had that performance against Alabama in Tuscaloosa,
Oh
they
yeah,
don't walk
yeah,
out of there with a victory. And
yeah.
so we know Kirby Smart's a master motivator. We know that
Mhm.
it's going to be tough to play in Tuscaloosa, but not impossible to win there. We saw Texas do it last year. LSU has done it a number of times recently. So it's not impossible to go win on the road there, but Georgia does have its work cut out for them against Alabama. And I think they're going to need to expose the back end of Alabama's secondary if they wish to do that. But we'll save that preview for next week because we're going to have an absolutely loaded show with that game on the horizon. But Grant, this week we have two marquee games I want to talk about, and USC Michigan is going to be the first one. We saw this week Sharon Moore named Alex Orji the starting quarterback in place of Davis Warren, who had started the previous three games. Raised some eyebrows across the country. He has not been good. There's not been a good answer in that Michigan quarterback room, but it was very clear that Davis Warren was not going to be an answer. Alex Orji starts this week. Does that give Michigan a spark at home to USC? Because USC is the one coming in with the swagger, with the momentum. Michigan, a home underdog for the second time in 3 weeks. They look like they're on the ropes as a program. Colston Loveland's health is in question. Is that the spark Michigan needs to beat USC? Or do you think they're just going to have to get through a grind of this early season until they figure out that offense?
A spark. I definitely think it'll be a spark. Um, it could just be a quarter. It could be the first half. But down the stretch, we all know what's coming, and that is Alex Orji will have to throw the ball, and they will
Right.
know that he will have to throw the ball. And that is something that he doesn't even do as well as Davis Warren did, and that's who they just benched. So you kind of have, I understand where they're coming from. Is obviously this is not working. Um, we can't sit back. We can't expect Warren to kind of replicate what McCarthy has been able to do over, when they had him. But with Orgy, they have something. They have something that's at least dynamic in a way that keeps linebackers off balance and maybe keeps some defenders honest. Early in the game or late in the game. But it's something different, and they had to do it. I mean, credit to them for not just sticking with Warren and just going through a season of whatever that was, you know.
Absolutely. It's going to be interesting with Michigan because D'Anton Lynn, USC's defensive coordinator, has revamped that defense and it's played a lot better. But then, like you're mentioning, Alex Orji is not a threat in the vertical pass game whatsoever. So Michigan's going to come out and want to run the football. And it's not because they just want to do it because they like it. It's because they don't have a choice but to run the football first, hoping the box gets loaded and they can hit a couple of efficient passes over the top here and there with Orji. I just don't see a path for Michigan. And we're going to pick this game here in a little bit. But if Michigan cannot throw the football, I don't know how they stay in the game. And this is not going to be because USC is going to go in there and score 30 points. I just don't know how Michigan's going to find a way to score. If USC knows they're going to run the football, they load the box, and Orji doesn't find a way to stretch the field horizontally or vertically. However they choose to use the passing game, they're going to have to get them some rhythmic throws early, and they're going to have to be physical up front. They're going to have to channel that Penn State game from last year. I know the personnel is different, but that kind of mentality where, okay, we can't throw the football, so we're going to load up and stop us. Go ahead. We're going to bring an extra lineman. Go ahead and stop us. I think that's the approach that Michigan has to use to win the game. They have to slow it down, and Orji's going to have to be a factor with his arm. I don't see another way around it because USC with Miller Moss, Lincoln Riley, it's a creative offense. They're not going to have their way with the Michigan defense because it's extremely talented. Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant up front, Will Johnson on the back end. There's 3 NFL, probably first or second round picks on that Michigan defense. So Miller Moss will have his hands full, but in terms of offense that I trust, I'm going to take USC and Lincoln Riley over Sharon Moore and Michigan. Let's look at Tennessee and Oklahoma now. I want to go to the SEC. So this is Oklahoma's season opener. Josh Heupel's returning to Norman. A lot of factors going into this game. Oklahoma's a team that we thought would be about middle of the road in the SEC. Tennessee is a team that we thought would be a step above Oklahoma, but not necessarily contending for the SEC. But so far this season, that's what they look like they can do, is contend for the SEC and a college football playoff spot. It's not just been a high-flying offense. They've done it balanced on offense, running the football and throwing, and they've played really good defense. So I think this game is going to be the game of the week, and I'm really excited to watch this one play out on the field. What's your feel looking at this game just a couple days out?
What I'm looking forward to is seeing what Brett Venables can do against this Tennessee offense and Nico and the way they're rolling right now. I think it's time for Venables to really take a step up and prove his worth, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They get Tennessee at home. They have every advantage possible to put pressure on Tennessee in that sense. It's going to be a test of if Oklahoma can finally, become the team that Venables wanted to make them into, and he's had time to make them into. It's and also a matchup that Tennessee and Oklahoma, in the SEC, it's just a weird spectacle. It's going to be an interesting sight to see, but I'm really interested to see how Nico, navigates around what Venables is throwing at him.
Nico's definitely going to be the focus of this game. And I think Dylan Sampson really will be the key for the Tennessee offense because we all know that Nico's the focal point of the offense and that everything's going to have to run through him. And they've got to find ways to defend him. Venables is going to throw different looks at him, young quarterback on the road, tough environment. I think Norman's going to be absolutely electric for this one. But Dylan Sampson, the Tennessee running back, they've got to get him going early and keep him involved in the run game, but also the pass game. I think if he can do both out of the backfield, it's going to loosen up Nico. It's going to spread out Oklahoma's defense. They're going to have to cover an extra threat. So that's the game plan I would look for from Josh Heupel. And again, like Lincoln Riley, you're going into a big game. Heupel's going to have something specific drawn up for this game offensively. And in the inverse, Brent Venables will have something defensively that we've not seen before for this matchup. And Oklahoma's quarterback, Jackson Arnold, I think he's going to have to play at a really high level. And we're really going to look at the turnover battle. I think that's where this game will be won or lost, is that turnover battle and just avoiding those mistakes with the young quarterbacks against creative offense for Tennessee and a creative defense for Oklahoma. So I'm really excited to see that duel back and forth here. Is there a storyline in this matchup that intrigues you the most? Is it Josh Heupel returning to Norman? Is it Oklahoma making its debut in the SEC? What do you make of this game storyline wise? Because it's an unorthodox matchup, but it's going to be extremely fun and entertaining, and it's cool to see it be an SEC matchup. But this is one of those first games we get with this conference realignment that we're going to get to see on a more regular basis.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, it's just going to be a spectacle to kind of see those two teams on the same field in the same conference, officially. But I really think this is a huge, swing game for kind of Oklahoma's momentum coming into the SEC, particularly. And I know I've kind of talked about Venables, and he's had time to instill what he wants there at Oklahoma and make Oklahoma not what they've been when Lincoln Riley was there. And I think this is a really good chance for Oklahoma to kind of prove that they are a team that can play in the SEC and belongs in the SEC. A team that can handle a Josh Heupel offense that is always just so potent, and a quarterback that is a Heisman candidate. It's going to be a really, really big game for that program. And like you said, Norman, just looking at the stadium, just seeing that is going to be very cool to see.
Especially with the night environment. And I agree with
Oh
you
yeah.
that this game will set the tone for Oklahoma going into the SEC just because of all those questions with, can they be a physical program? Texas seems more ready than them to join. How are they going to handle physical offenses or a high flying offense, which they're more so used to the high flying offense in the Big 12, but playing a good defense or a physical running game and doing that week to week in the SEC. So again, this is going to be a tone setter for Oklahoma moving into SEC play. But Grant, now let's move into our Saturday 7 selection. So we're going to make our week 4 picks here. We've been a little bit better than 500 so far this season. We've had a couple bad beats, to be honest. Oklahoma State, I'm still not over that Oklahoma State Arkansas game going to overtime.
That was nuts.
Yeah, but we'll save that rant for another day. So these week 4 picks, we'll go to the Big 10. This is a Friday night game. Illinois at Nebraska. This is a ranked versus ranked matchup. Nebraska favored by 8 at home.
Yeah.
Matt Rule doing some great things in Lincoln. Brett Bielema has got Illinois playing really well again. They took the year off last year, it seemed, but they're back on the national scene. I like this game. Dylan Raiola, Matt Rule. I think Nebraska is going to be a team that we're talking about in November in the Big Ten, especially when they come into Columbus at the end of October. They could be undefeated with one loss. So big game for Nebraska here. They're favored by 8. I like them to win and cover at home. Again, night environment, Friday night, lots of fun. People talking about maybe a letdown spot after that ranked matchup. Well, not ranked matchup. They were ranked, but old rivalry game against Colorado last week. I still like Nebraska here with the points.
Yeah, instantly I noticed numbers next to both Illinois and Nebraska as something that you just don't see very often. But it's gonna be really interesting to see how Nebraska, like you said, responds after an emotional game. Like you said, it wasn't a huge ranked matchup, but it was an emotional game and night for the program and for the players, I'm sure. I do like Nebraska. I don't know if I can take them to cover, but Nebraska by at least a touchdown, I definitely could take. I just think Nebraska has too much talent. Illinois is really well coached. That's for sure. But I think at Nebraska, at the end of the day, they'll end up pulling it out.
Old school Big Ten West game. I know we're a year removed from it, but that's exactly what this matchup will be. I'm with you there. USC, Michigan, another Big Ten game. Michigan hosting USC, and USC enters as the 5.5 point favorite. That line has swung about a touchdown since the preseason. Who do you like in this matchup? I know we touched on it earlier.
USC. Michigan just has too much to figure out right now, particularly on offense, and I think USC is in a spot where they can come in, take care of business.
I'm with you on that. I just don't know how Michigan's going to score with USC. Now, I would be perfectly happy to be wrong and see that, okay, Michigan is not completely fallen off the face of the earth offensively in this matchup, or the inverse of that. Maybe USC's defense was fool's gold against LSU, but I'm going to take USC just because I trust them more. This is similar with the Texas pick, although I'm much more confident in the Longhorns than the Trojans, but I'm also taking USC to cover on the road, that 5.5. I want to go now to the Big 12. Again, this is one of those expansion games here. Utah favored by 2 points on the road at Oklahoma State. Grant, who do you like in this matchup? I think this is going to be a tight game. Cam Rising is supposed to play as of right now. He's still been banged up. Who do you like in this matchup?
Yeah, this is about as much of a coin toss as I could think of it, especially at this point in the season. Just not totally knowing, these two teams. Like you said, Cam Rising coming back, seventh year. Oklahoma State, they have plenty of experience and they're starting off the year, pretty hot. And it's going to be in Stillwater, always a great environment to watch and to watch a team like Utah come into. But I could, I'm going to go with Cam Rising and the experience with him because, this is, probably going to be some scoring in this game. It always is in Stillwater. Um, I know Utah can slow it down, but I think they'll have to score some points, and I think Cam Rising will pull it out.
See, Grant, when I look at this game, I'm going to take just my personal approach here. I'm still upset with Oklahoma State for the Arkansas game, as I mentioned
Yeah.
at the top of the segment. And at the
Revenge.
same time, I don't trust Cam Rising to stay healthy in this game. And then let's add another layer personally here. I picked Utah to win the Big 12. So now do I affirm my preseason pick or do I deviate from that because I want to take Oklahoma State here? They're at home, it's at night. So I'm going to take Oklahoma State, and I'm going to do that reluctantly because I want to pick Utah. Again, this is like that USC pick. I trust Oklahoma State a little bit more at home. Mike Gundy, I think the Pokes are going to find a way to get this done. And 2 points, I mean, this is going to be a field goal game.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I'm good with that 2 points there. But next game, we'll go to the Big Ten. Really big spread on the board here. Team we have not gotten to talk about in 2 weeks because of the bye. Marshall going to Columbus to play Ohio State. Buckeyes favored by 40 in this matchup. Really love the defense from Ohio State and the run game so far this year. Do the Buckeyes win and cover in this matchup, or you think Marshall keeps it a little bit closer?
I think Ohio State, they could be looking down the schedule a little bit here. They have Iowa and Oregon, you know, coming up very soon. And I think the past 2 weeks they've handled business so well, and they just had the bye week. They may be somewhat sleepwalking into this game. Now, does that mean they're going to even come close to losing? No. I think they'll still win by at least 3 or 4 touchdowns or possessions. But 40 may be a little too much for Ohio State this week.
I'm going to take the Buckeyes to cover, Grant. I mean,
Yeah.
I look down this slate. I want to take a lot of the favorites, so I got to really tuck myself out of that. But just what we've seen defensively from Ohio State, I don't know how Marshall's going to score
Yeah, that's
more
fair.
than once.
Yeah.
Unless it's
Yeah.
a couple field goals. They've not let a team inside the red zone yet. The offense can beat you with the first team, second team, running the football, throwing the football. It doesn't matter what Ohio State does offensively. They've got different ways to beat you, and they can sustain drives. They can hit you with a big play. Lots of ways for Ohio State to beat you. So I'm going to take the Buckeyes with the 40 there to cover. And here is a Big Ten ACC showdown. Michigan State at Boston College. The Eagles favored by 6.5 in this matchup. Who do you like in this one? This is an 8 o'clock game at home, Boston College.
Michigan State has been somewhat of a surprise. They've handled themselves better than most people thought. But I think that spread is correct. I think Boston College is going to take it by, at least a touchdown. And they're, at home, Bill O'Brien, just probably a better, more prepared team at the moment.
Yeah, I want to stick with you on that. I'm going to go Boston
Yeah.
College there to cover. Again, it's going to happen eventually for Michigan State where they're not going to handle business the right way. And
Yeah.
I think this is that day. So I'm going to take Boston College at home at night. Memphis last week, Grant, they go into Doak Campbell, and I would say shocked the world, but a lot of us saw it coming. So they beat Florida State. Now they are 9.5-point favorites at Navy. Who do you like in this one? I think this is a sneaky letdown spot for Memphis.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have that much confidence in Memphis because I don't have any confidence in Florida State. So I think I have Navy, at least covering here. 9.5 seems like a lot of points for Memphis.
Especially playing a triple option game. It's a letdown spot.
Yeah. Oh
You
yeah.
you knew that game against Florida State would be the game or the data point on the playoff resume when they're contending for the group of 5 selection. And right now they're the favorite to do that. They controlled Florida State all of last week. They ran the football really well, held Florida State to under 80 yards in the first half. I just think Navy's going to keep it within the 9.5. I think Memphis wins, but I think Navy will keep it within the 9.5. And then our game of the week, Grant, Tennessee -7 at Oklahoma in Norman. Josh Heupel's return, Oklahoma's debut in the SEC. Again, 7-point spread in favor of the Volunteers. Who do you like and by how much?
This is really tough. Tennessee by 7 is interesting to me, especially in Norman. But I have to take Tennessee winning. I don't know if they can cover 7. I really just don't think they can. But I think Tennessee is just going to be a little too much for Oklahoma.
Grant, let's talk about this for one more second. I can see a
Mhm.
path where Tennessee wins this game by double digits, but also where it's a 34-30 game. I don't necessarily believe in my heart of hearts Oklahoma can win it. So I'm with you.
Yeah.
I can see a path for Tennessee to win this game by double digits if they can, take the top off of Brett Venables' defense. I just am not fully convinced that they can. I think Venables will have something ready. That fan base is ready for this game. Oklahoma's ready. So I'm going to take Oklahoma to cover that 7, but Tennessee to get the win. Grant, any closing thoughts here at the end of that pick segment before we wrap up the show?
Just another week of matchups that we never thought we'd see, or we didn't think we'd see in a long time. We talked a lot about Tennessee, Oklahoma, and so you get these teams and these matchups that you really just have to embrace and sit down and watch. Have some fun watching it, and not think about the fact that there's a lot of other stuff going on in college football, but USC at Michigan coming right up as well. So it's going to be a fun weekend. There's a lot of matchups there that I haven't been as confident as I have in weeks past. So there's a lot of potential for something crazy happening.
There is. And we get the historic matchup between USC and Michigan, old school Rose Bowl. Now that's a conference game. And like you said, Tennessee, Oklahoma, it's going to be outstanding in that game. It's going to be probably the only game you should watch in that window unless you are a fan of another team that's playing. So I'll certainly be tuned in and really looking forward to that. And then I think we got some potential for some upsets. But guys, thank you for listening to today's episode. Remember to like and subscribe to our channel. Leave us a review because it really helps out our show. Check us out on social media at Saturday Cadence for more content throughout the week. And remember, the Saturday Cadence podcast is the heartbeat of college football. For Grant Kincaid, I am Blake Biscardi, and we'll see you next time. God bless.